Hi, and welcome to this PowerShell quick tip video. This one is again with Active Directory. So we're going to be taking a look at the Set-ADUser commandlet, and more specifically, how to modify any property of an Active Directory user using the Set-ADUser commandlet. So let's go ahead and let's just take a look at exactly what we're going to be dealing with. So we have this test employee user object. So if I actually look at it in Active Directory through the GUI, I have this attribute editor. If you don't have this tab here, make sure in your Active Directory users and computers, you have the advanced features turned on, and then go into the OU where your user is, double click on it, and then as it comes up for me here, that's employee 2 and employee 1. So we have this attribute editor here, which has tons of different attributes that we can, of course, modify and set or clear out. So we're actually going to be taking a look at how to actually set up a lot of these. So let's go into our PowerShell window and let's get started here. So the first thing we want to do, of course, is just set up our variables of the user and the domain that we're going to be working with here. So all I want to do is just put in a username here, and we're just going to put that as employee1. And we're going to create a variable called domain, and we're going to set that to jacked. And let's just take a look at the user that we're working with here. So we're going to get ADUser identity username, and then the server we're going to be dealing with is going to be domain. And let's just take a look at what this gives us. Of course, we're going to actually highlight all the lines here. Let's run it. So we get our user back, but we don't get a whole lot of properties. So in order to get all the properties back, we can add a parameter called properties and put star, and that will get us everything back. This will give us a very, very long list of parameters that are set. Now, they won't be as long as that list that we looked at, because it will only get the common ones that are the common ones that might not be set, and then the uncommon ones that are actually set here. So as we can actually see, we don't see proxy addresses here. And that's actually going to be one of the ones that we're going to be modifying. So really what I want to look at for properties is going to be employee ID, description, and then proxy addresses. So now if we actually go ahead and we run this here, we are going to see that we get our employee ID, our description, and then the proxy addresses, we actually still don't see it, but that is okay. We are going to see it once we actually start setting information in it. Just be aware that it is actually empty right now. So what we're going to first do is look at the Set-ADUser commandlet and see what we can actually do with that here. So we have our Set-ADUser commandlet. We can put in our identity. So we know our identity is going to be username. Our server is going to be our domain, and then we have a bunch of other parameters. Now we're going to see that we actually have a lot of parameters like credential, department, description, which description is one that we want to change. We actually have employee ID as well, but if I keep looking in here and scroll down to proxy addresses, we actually don't have a parameter for proxy addresses. As you can tell, this list of parameters is a lot shorter than the list of properties that are on an Active Directory user. This is where we can actually use the 3 parameters here. One of them is called add, the other one is replace, and the other one is remove. So this will actually let us add, replace, or remove any of the properties by using a hash table. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at an example here. So we're going to just remove the Set-ADUser for now, and we're going to create our property hash table with all the properties that we actually want it to set. And we're going to go through and add a replace and a remove and see the differences in all of them and see the different ways that they actually work. So we're going to create a variable here. We're going to name it property hash. And we're going to create a hash table here. So that's just the @ symbol and then the curly brackets. And then we're going to have our closing curly bracket. And then we're going to put our properties and what we actually want them to be equal. So I'm going to put a property ID for employee ID, sorry. And we're going to have that set to 1, 2, 3, 4 for now. We're going to add a description and we're going to put that to test here. And then we're going to put proxy addresses and we're just going to put that to employee 1, because usually this is an SMTP address. So let's put SMTP employee 1 employee 1 at jacked.ca. All right, and then all we need to do is Set-ADUser. We're going to once again put in our identity of username. I actually like to put in then the hash table here. So we're going to do add first. And we're going to put the property hash. And then we're going to put in our server, which is our domain variable here. So let's go ahead and let's just run this. And we got no errors. So let's go ahead and let's just do another get right at the bottom here and see what we have now. So here we actually have our proxy addresses has come back. And we can actually see proxy addresses comes back as an object. It's more of an array or also a hash table. So we have our SMTP here. So that actually is very nice. We have our employee ID and we have our description. So that's actually awesome here. So let's say if we actually wanted to do another add here. So let's just take this property hash. We're just going to paste it down here. And we're going to do another add. Now, let's say I wanted to add another SMTP address here. So let's just change this to a, let's actually change this to employee 1 at jacked.ca. We're going to say at test.jacked.ca. This is going to like be our test domain here. So if we actually try and run this here, we are going to see that it did actually work here. And now if we do our get-ADUser, it seems to have worked just fine, which that's kind of as expected. Everything has worked. But now let's say if we change this to a 5 for the employee ID. So now the employee ID is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And let's try this Set-ADUser. We are going to see that we encounter an issue. And now if we do the get-ADUser here, we're going to see that we still have our 2 proxy addresses. So that worked from the first time. But if we actually do a test1.jacked.ca and we run this, we still get our error message because our error message is caused by the employee ID. And if we get the ADUser, we're going to see that we don't have the test1.jacked.ca. And this is because you can only have one employee ID. So if the employee ID matches, everything will be fine. And it'll keep adding. Same thing for the description because the description can only have one. So that will actually happen as well. So if we actually fix the employee ID here and do the add, we're going to see that it works perfectly fine. And if we do our get-ADUser, we have the new proxy address here as well. But now if we do change the description to testing and we do the Set-ADUser, once again, because description and employee ID are single value properties, we can't add to them. So if they are different than what's already there, it will cause an issue. So this is where we would actually end up using the replace or potentially the remove parameters. So let's go ahead and let's actually take a look at that here. So let's go ahead and let's set up another property hash here. And let's set up as the employee ID as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the description as testing. And let's say we only want the proxy address of employee1 at jacked.ca. And let's do a Set-ADUser. once again, we can actually copy paste this whole line here and just change the add parameter to a replace. And let's see what happens here. So once we actually run that, as you can see, we got no errors this time, even though the employee ID and the description were different. Because we're replacing it, it doesn't give us that error because we're actually just replacing it. And as you can see, now that because we only had one proxy address, we are back down to our one proxy address that we wanted. Our employee ID is 12345 now, and our description is now testing. So it has replaced all of the properties. So that actually has worked fine. We can actually insert more than one proxy address here. So we can actually put an array in our hash table. And we can say that the second one that we want to add here is just SMTP employee1 at test.jacked.ca. And if we go ahead, if we run this again, we can see that now we have our two proxy addresses, and then we still have our employee ID and our description, but we did do a replace. So if this was actually different, it would have actually replaced anything that was already there. So definitely they both have their use cases for sure. If you just want to add, what I would honestly recommend is just build out a property hash table of the properties you want to add to. And these are going to be properties that are able to have multiple values. If it's something that could only have one value, I usually use the replace. This way you're sure whatever is there is going to be removed. Now you might want to have some type of logic to make sure you're not overwriting something that you shouldn't. But that would go again with the scripting process. So what we can actually do here is we can test out the add, and we could just add this proxy address here. So let's just go ahead and let's just create this here, and we're going to add this proxy address. We got no error messages, and now when we get the ADUser, we actually have our 3 proxy addresses, which will actually take us into the remove part of this video. So we can actually remove very specific values from these attributes. So let's go ahead and let's just take a property hash once again. And let's say that we want to remove employee IDs that are 000, descriptions that are test, and then we want to remove, actually, we don't know what we want to remove yet, actually. That will actually be my preferred method here. So let's say we get given a task for removing our SMTP addresses from our test1.jacked.ca. We have a bunch of users that have proxy addresses that are in there, and we want to be able to remove them all. So what you would actually go ahead and do is you would write a loop that would get your ADUser here. So let's create a variable called ADUser, and we're going to equal that to our get ADUser. And we are getting back the proxy addresses and everything like that. So now if we go into our ADUser, go into proxy addresses, we get our 3 proxy addresses. Now there are actually 2 ways to remove the one that we don't want. So we can actually use the remove parameter, that's what we're actually going to look at first. And then we're going to use the replace. So let's do the remove first. So let's say we wanted to remove the test1.jacked.ca as our example here. So let's go ahead and let's create our hash table. And our hash table is going to be the proxy addresses. And what we're actually going to say here is we're going to put a variable wrapper. And we're going to say ADUser.proxy addresses, and we're going to pipe that to where $_ I think is where we're going to be able to do that. Let's just test it out here. So star at test1 .jack.ca. So if we actually just look at what this would equal, and the property is null. So I think it is actually just like that. I don't think you need the pipe. Yeah, perfect. So you don't actually need the pipe because we don't actually have properties. So we're just taking a array and we are seeing where it is equivalent to a star. So where it's like, so this is a wildcard. So anything before the @ symbol at test1.jacked.ca. So this is going to be our proxy addresses. So if we actually look and generate this property hash, and then we look at the property hash itself, we are going to see that there is our test1.jacked.ca. And then what we can do is Set-ADUser identity, and we can say username, and we can do a remove, and we're going to remove the property hash, and we're going to put in our server here. So if we actually go ahead and we run this, we get no error messages, which is perfect. And then if we actually just look at our user here, so get-ADUser, we will actually see that that proxy address has been removed. So that's how you would actually remove a very specific proxy address. Let's say if you had a domain change and you need to remove these proxy addresses or any specific entry from a specific attribute, this would be the easiest way to actually go ahead and do it. You would loop through all of your Active Directory users, create the property hash, then based on that ADUser, that property, and then just filter out exactly what you want and then remove it. The other option, which is very, very similar, you would actually have the exact same steps pretty much. So what we can do here is just, let's go ahead and let's add the property hash. Let's go add that test1.jacked.ca back in here. And we're just going to make sure that it's back in. So let's go ahead and let's look at our ADUser. So we can see that the 3 SMTP addresses are back in there. And we're going to be using the replace instead this time. So with the replace, what we would actually want to do is not like. So now if we actually go ahead and let's just generate this. And before we do our replace, what I always like to do is just look at what the property hash looks like. There it is. We have our 2 SMTP addresses, our test.jacked.ca and our just jacked.ca. That looks very good. So let's go ahead and let's run this here. And now we can see that we only get back our 2 SMTP addresses. So this is perfect. This is exactly what we wanted. And you can even make it a little bit step further here. So if we actually go ahead, we just add the other test one back in. If someone asks you to remove any test addresses altogether, so as you can see in our properties, in our proxy addresses, we still have 2 test ones. What you can actually do is just, again, this depends on the naming of your domain here, but anything that has an @test can be removed here. So if we actually go ahead and we just run all of this and look at our property hash, we should only be left with our 1 SMTP address. And then we can do a Set-ADUser with the replace option and then get-ADUser. And then there it is. We only have our 1 SMTP address for that user that we actually want. They don't have any old remnants of their old email addresses, whether they changed names. So you can easily do these things if the beginning of the @ symbol doesn't match their current username. Maybe you want to keep those because they had a name change, so you want to keep those emails active for a few months and then remove them later on. This is exactly how you would actually do that using the Set-ADUser with the replace or remove parameter. I find either one really works. The only thing that really changes is the filtering method. You're either going to filter out the one you want to remove or filter out the ones that you want to keep, and then use the proper parameter to execute that. So that is a very easy way to use the Set-ADUser commandlet to modify any properties of a Active Directory user in PowerShell. Hopefully you guys can find some use for this commandlet. I use it very often, and I would definitely recommend always using the add, replace, or remove instead of manually putting in all the different parameters for the different values. It just looks a little bit cleaner, a little bit easier to read afterwards as well, because everything's going to be in a hash table that you can easily reference. If you guys have any commandlets that you guys would like me to look at or have any questions on this video, please let me know in the comment section down below. I will do my best to answer every single one of them, or if it's something that can benefit a lot of people, I will make a video on it. Please be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and also be sure to hit that notification bell to be notified when that next video comes out, and I will see you guys on the next video.